Picture this. It's fall 2009, and you're watching TV with your older brother in the living room after school. It's a clear afternoon, and the dimming sun is streaming through a crack between the curtains. The episode of SpongeBob you've seen 1,000 times cuts to commercial, and between the ads for OxyClean and movies now showing in IMAX, you see an ad for a video game. You're immediately struck by its unique aesthetic and gritty music. You and your brother agree it looks cool, and you silently decide to start saving your allowance so you can buy the game for him for his upcoming birthday. The day finally comes, and the cashier at Toys R Us gives you and your mom a hard time for some reason because the game is rated M, so your mom has to pretend she's buying the game for herself, which is so clearly not true. Alright, you know what, this is getting ridiculously specific, but you get the point. Today we're going to talk about how Borderlands, one of my all-time favorite game franchises, lost its identity, and in the process, the goodwill of fans like me. When my brother finally unwrapped his gift and started playing the game, we were both taken with the world of Pandora, a desolate, lifeless wasteland where guns and bad guys grow on trees. Except they can't, because there are no trees.
I thought you said your mom would be the one playing this
Get out of
game.
here, Toys R Us guy. God. There was something gratifying about watching his inventory incrementally fill with an increasingly powerful collection of weapons, some of which we got legitimately attached to. He picked up a blue shotgun in the early game that had some bonkers stats on it and used it for nearly the entire campaign. And when it finally came time to get rid of it, we were sad to see him go. It was like losing a friend, but that friend can't do anything but shoot bruisers in the face. Every gun chest and boss fight felt like an exciting pull of a slot machine, giving the player a chance at a new lead-spewing, enemy-dismembering toy. And if you're really lucky, that toy would be of the legendary variety. Getting a legendary weapon meant an immediate and palpable jump in your effectiveness in combat, which in turn makes it easier to mow down that next big guy who could drop you a legendary. This gameplay loop is the backbone of Borderlands, and it was executed pretty gracefully in the original, which is definitely not the case for later entries in the series, but we'll get there. I also want to give a big ol' Arthur Morgan-sized tip of the cap to Borderlands 1's atmosphere, which might still be my favorite in the series. That twangy, syrupy guitar that punctuates the soundtrack will live rent-free in my head forever. And I can definitely say the same for my brother, who actually did the music for this video. I've linked his channel in the description below, so definitely check it out if you like what you hear. Borderlands 1's depressing and sparse world was brightened by just the right amount of levity provided by characters like Scooter, Marcus, and TK Baha, who don't necessarily deliver laugh-out-loud jokes, but instead use their colorful personalities to lighten the mood.
You? One more step and it'll be your last. You should have seen the look on your face.
On the world design front, the game managed to create some interesting set pieces while maintaining that signature ramshackle architecture. The combination of these elements serves to create a world that feels cohesive, immersive, subversive, submersible, reversible, and water-soluble. Everything has this feeling of grime, and even in the most civilized parts of Pandora, like New Haven, you can't escape the fact that this is a low-tech world built from rusty scraps. As for the story, well, it's there, and I would rather eat bland food than food that's so over-seasoned you have to take a dump between every bite, but again, we'll get there. You know, I gotta slow it down, I gotta take it easy. That's what TK would've wanted. The endgame content and DLCs were also a bright spot, and thanks to some fun glitches, which are also a franchise mainstay, farming great loot felt super exciting. Using a glitch to fall through the floor and into General Knox's vault, or hiding on that tiny ledge by Cromerax to make yourself invincible never got old, especially because an all-new, ultra-rare tier of weapon was introduced. I remember the moment I got the Jackal shotgun after weeks of farming, and then it fell through the floor of Cromerax's elevator and I lost it forever. You know, man, I don't even want to talk about it. But enough about Borderlands 1. Let's get to that creme de la creme, that Borderlands caviar. When Borderlands 2 came out, I was older, wiser, and finally allowed to play shooters. Thank you, Dad. To this day, I still remember pacing around the house as I waited for the UPS man to show up on release day, and unlike Borderlands 3, the wait was worth it. Borderlands 2, in my opinion, is the best loot shooter ever made. It improved on Borderlands 1 in every way while still somehow preserving the soul of what made the original great. The guns felt better to shoot and there were more of them. The character customization and build potential was cranked up past 11 and into the goofy zone. The biomes were far more visually diverse than those of Borderlands 1, but still somehow carried with them that tangible feeling of desolation and lawlessness. The legendary items were more distinct, and rather than just being a regular item with great stats, they had unique properties that set them apart, like shooting in unique patterns or having your gun fly around shooting people whenever you reload. The boss designs and set pieces were top-notch as well, but the real star of the show is Handsome Jack and the story surrounding him. Handsome Jack is on my Mount Rushmore of game villains. Damian Clark turns in an absolutely phenomenal vocal performance, full of wit and annoyingly undeniable charisma, transforming a pretty good story into something special.
I need your help. I know what you're thinking. Yeah, trap, don't listen. But it's about my grandmother. I built her a cottage on the Iridium Blight Inn. I need you to check on her. Please. Oh, jeez. I'm sorry. Thank God. I was so worried you'd killed those bandits before they could murder old Gran. And you know what? Now I don't even have to pay him, so thanks for the help, man. Still gonna kill you, though.
I think the core of what makes him so good as a villain comes from the fact that, well, he's kinda right about the player. Handsome Jack's goal is to cleanse Pandora of all of the violence and bad actors to usher in an era of peace under his rule through any means necessary. While that plan certainly involves genocide, which is bad, the player really has no moral leg to stand on because you spend the entire game indiscriminately wiping out every pocket of civilization you find. I mean, he may be a power-hungry lunatic with a god complex, but like many of the best antagonists, there's a nugget of truth buried somewhere beneath his egomaniacal facade. And, unfortunately, Handsome Jack, along with a few other characters in Borderlands 2, was pretty funny. I do think if I revisited the game today as someone in their mid-20s, I'd find the humor a little dated, but as a 13-year-old, those jokes were hitting. And I know for many, the humor was one of the standout additions to the game, which would also have some unfortunate consequences down the line. The late game bosses and DLCs were also great across the board, especially Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragonkeep, which may be my favorite DLC for any game ever. These things combined to make the quest to collect all of the legendary weapons and optimize your build a super enjoyable one that kept me entertained for over 1,000 hours across double-digit playthroughs. And I wasn't alone in that enjoyment. Borderlands 2 is currently one of the top 20 all-time best-selling games on Steam, above games like Dark Souls 3 and Skyrim. And it took home quite a few awards at the Monster Energy Drink, Spike TV, Carl's Jr. / Hardy Spike TV Game Awards, brought to you by Hooters and OxyClean the Movie, now in IMAX, including Best Multiplayer Game, Best Voice Actor, and Best Shooter. Thanks to the game's widespread acclaim and growing fan base, Borderlands 3 instantly became a must-play, highly anticipated title for millions, and I was firmly in that camp when I beat Borderlands 2 for the first time. So, all the way back in 2012, I, along with the rest of the fan base, began the long wait for the game we knew would take this franchise to new heights. But between 2 and 3, we got Borderlands the pre-sequel, which I won't spend a ton of time on since it shares most of its mechanics with Borderlands 2. The story was pretty cool, actually, although it implies a history between Handsome Jack and the main cast that had clearly not been thought of before Borderlands 2's release. The new weapon types and character classes were fun enough too, but like I said, none of it strays all that far from the Borderlands 2 experience, apart from the oxygen mechanic, which forced you to spend time worrying about keeping your oxygen tank full when on the moon's surface, which I was not a fan of. Like, why are we including a survival game mechanic in a loot shooter? It's like ordering a pizza and finding a huge scoop of chocolate ice cream on it. Like, chocolate ice cream is fine by itself, but there's a time and a place, and this was not it. More notably during this period, we also got Tales from the Borderlands, which set a new high for the series in terms of story. Telltale's take on Pandora was a heartfelt and endearing one, and it proved that great stories with new characters could still be told in the Borderlands world while preserving the tone of the original game. The character development for Reese and Vaughn, two Hyperion corporate goons who find themselves stranded on Pandora, was executed extremely well, instantly making them fan favorites and locks to return in Borderlands 3, which was still a full 5 years out from releasing at the time. So, plenty of time to incorporate Reese and Vaughn in ways that stayed true to their characters. Borderlands 3 was probably my most anticipated game release ever at the time, which made it sting that much more when I realized just how far off the mark they were in so many different areas. But I want to give credit where it's due first. In terms of pointing your gun at a guy and shooting him to death, Borderlands 3 is the best game in the series by far. The weapons and their manufacturers feel more distinct and satisfying than ever before, and their sound design is delectable, dare I say scrumptious. If you turned off the UI and handed me any Borderlands 3 weapon, I could instantly tell you what brand it came from based on the look and feel alone. The new cast of Vault Hunters, while not exactly memorable in terms of personality, are very well designed, and I think the choice to give each character 3 action skills instead of 1 deepens the already considerable build diversity the game offers. The updated graphics are also really nice, although I think they went a little overboard with the VFX and at times things look like kind of a cluttered mess. But still, in isolation, there are some amazing vistas in this game, and on the whole, I think the art team crushed it. Unfortunately, that's where my praise for the game ends. Even though the real problem with Borderlands 3 is its story, which we'll talk about in a second, I also think the game completely fumbles the way legendary weapons work. This is something I mentioned in my Breath of the Wild video, but to do legendary gear properly, there are 2 basic things you need to accomplish. First, that legendary gear needs to be objectively powerful, and second, it needs to be hard to get. That's it. In Borderlands 3, they fail on both somehow. They leaned even harder into the gimmicks that Borderlands 2's legendary guns introduced, often at the cost of utility. Who cares if my rocket launcher shoots flaming cheeseburgers if it can't kill anything? Legendaries are also disturbingly easy to come by in Borderlands 3. About halfway through the game, I had so many of them that I had to start filling up my locker on the ship with them just to make space in my backpack. And since the legendaries are frequently not worth using, they really serve no purpose beyond looking cool, which totally cheapens the experience of getting a new one. Alright, enough build-up. It's time to talk about the story. Borderlands 3's story is so bad that it sucks the enjoyment out of the things the game does right. In Borderlands 2, the story hinged on a few serious characters like Lilith and Roland, which allowed comic relief characters like Claptrap and Tiny Tina to shine. In Borderlands 3, every character tries to be both, resulting in an insufferable cacophony of boring dialogue, worse jokes, and failed attempts to make us care about anyone or anything. Borderlands 3's writing sounds like it was written by someone who was locked in a sensory deprivation chamber with nothing but BuzzFeed as reference material.
Vault Hunter, I'm almost there. Just gotta solve one problem.
You're not designed to solve problems, Balix. That's my job. You're just my chauffeur.
Well, what I'm solving is the anti-collision safeguards, which I just turned off. Navigate it, bitches!
Take Vaughn from Tales, for example. In Tales, Vaughn is a well-meaning nerd who slowly removes his corporate shackles and embraces the lawless nature of Pandora. His character was extremely likable, relatable even, as a symbol of leaving the rat race behind to truly be happy. In Borderlands 3, however, he's a psychomaniac who can't get through a sentence without delivering a cringeworthy one-liner that makes me want to play the game on mute.
Vault Hunter, bro. I gotta say, I've been on a lot of crazy road trips, but your driving skills, they're tasty, bro. They're tasty! So, if you want to ride sometime, you just let me know, bro. Bro trip!
Look how they mess with my boy.
Worse yet, most characters in the game behave this way, to the point where it feels like the writers were being paid by the joke.
I bet you're like, why are you calling pizza? Because you can deliver a pizza anywhere, shorty. And people are like, ooh, this is splendid. Now scurry on, I shan't be tipping you. And then I'm like, here's a tip, kaboom, sucker!
And the villains. Look, Handsome Jack's shoes were going to be near impossible to fill, but the Calypso twins don't even come close, despite their initially intriguing concept. I thought the choice to make them EchoNet celebrities was an interesting one, but their execution falls so incredibly flat. Handsome Jack's charm and wit were replaced with playground insults that succeed in making me dislike them as characters, but not for the right reasons. Sure, I wanted them to die, but not because I wanted to foil their evil plans, but because I just wanted them to stop talking. Look, maybe Borderlands 3 gave you what you wanted from a Borderlands game, in that you got to shoot some cool guns and level up a character, but in my opinion, the previous games showed that the series is capable of more than that. Tales from the Borderlands and Borderlands 2 showed that good stories can be told on Pandora while balancing comedy with sincerity. And at worst, Borderlands 1 showed how a simple, inoffensive story can do the job while letting the gameplay and atmosphere do the heavy lifting. In Borderlands 3, though, the game's poor writing is especially damaging to the experience because it quadruples down on humor, and every genuine moment in the game is beaten over the head with jokes. This is something I've considered making a separate video on entirely, but there's something that happens from time to time when a piece of media goes mainstream, where that media's creator decides to hyper-focus on what they think makes the show or game popular, and often ruin subsequent installments in the process. For Borderlands, that was the decision to prioritize humor above all else, and in my eyes, Borderlands 3 is where the series lost its identity. The original world was desolate, low-tech, grimy, and often beautifully understated. Its atmosphere was a bleak one, where colorful characters offered the occasional bright spot. Borderlands 3's world is one where the desolation of Pandora is supposed to awkwardly coexist with cyberpunk cityscapes, internet celebrities, live streaming, spaceships, warp speed technology, and an endless supply of failed comedians. While Borderlands 3 emulates and even improves upon its predecessors in terms of gameplay and art, its world feels nothing like those of the games that made the series unique and interesting. We went from Cage the Elephant to Alicia Keys. We went from Zero stabbing people on the roof of a moving train with Short Change Hero playing in the background to lengthy sequences of making people frozen yogurt. That's really the best way to sum up what happened to Borderlands. Worse yet, it seems the criticism of Borderlands 3's story has somehow emboldened Gearbox to lean even harder into comedy. Let me ask you something. What words come to mind when you think of Roland? I would say he's stoic, serious, calm, and focused.
Chicken!
With that in mind, would you cast Kevin Hart to play him? Probably not, and you certainly wouldn't put him in a Guardians of the Galaxy knockoff road trip movie, which is exactly what the Borderlands movie is shaping up to be. And to quote one of the comments on the trailer, this is probably not going to go over well with true Borderlands fans. You know what else didn't go over well with true Borderlands fans? Tiny Tina's Wonderlands and new Tales from the Borderlands, the two installments that have come out since Borderlands 3. While I will talk about both, I don't have nearly as much to say about them because I didn't play them all the way through, which to me shows where the series is at with a lot of its fans. Before Borderlands 3, each installment of the game was an event for me. I used to Google Borderlands 3 news almost daily while I was waiting for it to come out. I would scrutinize every leaked piece of art for the smallest bit of information about the game. When the trailers dropped, I watched frame-by-frame breakdowns so I could learn as much as I possibly could. But for Wonderlands, which is based on Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep, which I love, I gave trailers a passing glance, had no idea when the game released, picked it up a few months later on sale, played it for about 4 hours once, and haven't touched it since. I can't blame all of that on the game, though. I do think my tastes have changed, and generally speaking, I enjoy campaign-driven shooters much less these days. Unless we're talking about Doom. Doom is sick. But still, Borderlands is such a special series to me, and when I played Wonderlands, it became very clear very quickly that Borderlands 3's biggest issues were front and center again in Wonderlands.
I need a dank ranking. You gotta rank the dank. If I'm being frank, you gotta rank the dank.
Oh, you need me to crank out a dank crank? Well, the Franks would say, same kind of same.
The writing and dialogue were suffocating, to the point where me and my friends just started talking over the characters, which completely disconnected us from the story. The guns were fun to use and the characters were intriguing, but it just didn't feel like the Borderlands from the first two games. Sure, the basic gameplay loop is the same, but there was a tonal consistency and unique vibe that made the worlds of the first two games exciting to inhabit. But with Wonderlands, I felt that excitement fade completely as the game seemed to further prioritize comedy and goofiness, which were just never that big a part of what made Borderlands great, in my opinion. This shift in identity has also caused a rift in the community as well, with some of the biggest content creators choosing to still make the majority of their videos about Borderlands 2, while others have moved on to 3. While this has caused some debate about which game is better, one thing is agreed upon unanimously. Wonderlands was disappointing, and the franchise just isn't what it used to be. Things only deteriorated further with the release of New Tales from the Borderlands, which is the most poorly received Borderlands game to date with a juicy 4.1 user score on Metacritic. Unlike Tales from the Borderlands, which was written by Telltale Games, New Tales was written in-house by Gearbox, and it shows. Described as an interactive sitcom by its lead writer, New Tales uses the decaying husk of the Borderlands franchise to tell a story that couldn't be further from its source material. When I played Borderlands for the first time, I never thought I'd hear someone in this universe make jokes about student loan debt or frozen yogurt, but here we are. I'll be honest, I didn't even bother giving this one a try and have mainly been watching playthroughs from other creators to get a sense of the experience. And so far, I have not been able to go more than a minute or so without hearing a joke so cringeworthy it makes me want to fold in half like a cheap metal chair. I promise you, look up a playthrough of New Tales, skip anywhere in the video, and you'll be under 10 seconds from something painfully unfunny.
Hey, Papa Girardi! I can smell your space calzones from here!
Ah, thanks! I need a new name for them!
Iconic.
I also need to stop doing that problematic accent!
Yeah, I know.
Bye, Octavio.
Miss Johnson! Did you get a cybernetic leg? That thing's straight fire.
New Tales is a perfect distillation of everything that has gone wrong with Borderlands, and it gives me little hope for the future of what used to be my favorite game franchise. But the point of this video isn't just to point and laugh at what a fustercluck the Borderlands franchise has become. I made this video because Borderlands meant so much to my younger self, and while this might sound dramatic, Borderlands 2 was a comforting constant in my life as I navigated the turbulent waters of becoming a young adult. It was where I nurtured some of my closest friendships, and watching my brother play the original from the couch after school is still an experience I look back on with nostalgia and fondness. I made this video because I hope for a future where he and I can look at a Borderlands trailer and say, that looks cool. And while I think that's improbable, I don't think it's impossible. There just needs to be a shift back towards the roots of the series and not this new identity that's more interested in being zany than being good. Slow down on the jokes, let the atmosphere breathe, take me back to the wasteland. Start treating the previous games and their characters with just a little bit of respect, and for God's sake, fix the legendary weapons, please. It's not that hard. That's what fans like me are waiting for. Thanks for watching, subscribe if you feel like it, and I'll catch you in the next one.